Yo, stop the cap, stop the cap. What's up, guys? It's Stop Capping. It's September 19th, 2022, and we finally got another episode of Game Talk. I'm here with my special guest from China, Shanghai, Jason. Dramatic pause, Delfino. How do you doing today, sir?
Doing pretty damn good, man. How's everything going with you?
Pretty good. I thank you. I'm thanking you because not only that we go way back, and you're supporting my channel and all that stuff, but we're both wrestling fans and we're both gamers. And also at the end, we'll plug in Jamoba. You're CEO of Jamoba. Can you explain what Jamoba is?
Yeah, so for everyone out there, Jumoba is a video game fashion brand that we have based over in the US as well as China. With our signature Jumoba jackets, you can wear our jackets, scan the code on the jacket, and play the games directly onto your phone.
Thank you very much for sharing that. And today we have a very passionate um, situation here. So for a lot of you guys that may know who are old enough and guys who are not old enough to live through the N64 days but have either got a chance to play it or seen footage or talk amongst friends or family, we love wrestling games, but not just any wrestling games. We love the wrestling games that came out for the N64 system, the Nintendo 64. As you might know, many great games have been released to the system, such as Perfect Dark, Mario 64, the reboot of the Mario Kart, Super Smash Brothers, and Donkey Kong. And am I missing anything?
Um, that pretty much covers it. I mean,
Star
thinking
Fox,
of
Star
Star Fox,
Fox,
Star Fox
Star Fox
64, of course.
64. Whoa, almost missed that one. All right, so with all these games, we love the wrestling games. So one of the original games that we have played on the N64. So mind you, AEW is coming out with a wrestling game called Fight Forever, and it's basically a complete replica of the N64 game system, the gameplay, the entrances, all that stuff. And we have very, very high expectations for this game, especially since they showed us gameplay. And, we know how passionate, someone like Katie Omega is, who's, supporting the game, wants to release this type of game. And we've seen all the updated moves and all that, all the, the roster people, what they could do. So, Jason, tell me what type of impact the old N64 games, you know, impacted you, and what are your expectations for this game?
I would say it was tremendous because it was the beginning of us getting out of the arcade style of wrestling video games, where it was very just left to right and smash, and then just hope you can generate your finisher. To me, the N64 models had a lot more ring psychology to it as far as really putting in advanced effort to put your opponents down. It wasn't just, hit this, hit that. It really was you had to work the body, work different parts, and you got to really tell a story. And I think up until the N64 games, you really couldn't tell a story in a wrestling match in a video game.
Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, you're right. If a lot of these games started off originally in Japan called Virtual Pro Wrestling or Virtual Pro Wrestling, and mind you, is a wrestler AJ Styles' favorite wrestling game before the rest of these games came out. And then for the U.S., we started off with WCW versus the World, World Tour, followed by NWO, WCW, NWO Revenge. Then later on, we had WWF, now WWE games. We started from WrestleMania 2000, and then basically the cream of the crop, the Holy Grail, of wrestling games, WWF No Mercy. And we just checked up a website recently, and we saw that this game gets viewed at least twice every what?
2 times at least every hour.
2 times at least every hour. And if I find a link, I'll make sure I'll insert that link in the video. But it just tells you the impact of um, how important these games are for us. A big thing that changed the game altogether too was don't forget that the N64 had 4 controller ports. This was the basically the pinnacle of what couch co-op was because later on we had the PlayStation 2, and you had to buy the multi-tap to play couch co-op, multiplayer games. Now with Halo, yeah, you could play couch co-op, but it was practically limitless because, I guess if it's either racing or Halo, that was about it in terms of for the Xbox. And I know they came out with a WWE, WWF game. It was a Raw game back in the day. The graphics were nice and everything, but it was nowhere near the excitement and gameplay of No Mercy
Yeah.
and these other N64 games.
And to add on to the whole, having 4 players at once, you can also compare that to kind of like Smash Brothers, where it's like you're getting a chance to play with 3 other people. It is this kind of archaic type of melee where you really do get like the Super Smash Brothers of pro wrestling games, where it's no longer just the traditional one-on-one or the traditional standardized tag team matches where you fight in the middle and you walk in the middle and then you just kind of go to your corner to get a tag and then you go do that stuff, or even like a little standardized Texas tornado. I mean, you could really kind of, you know, let all the bells and whistles happen at once. You can really kind of take the gloves off in this kind of style of play, especially when you're doing certain match types like Fatal 4-Way. This is the opportunity where now you can just really put in efforts. It was very exciting when it comes to breaking up pinfalls, hitting particular different tag team moves on people. It was a huge adjustment from the standardized, 2D way we were approaching wrestling games.
Thanks, Jason, for adding that on. And yeah, and another thing that was really important for us was not only that the game it's completely replayable. All these games were completely replayable, especially No Mercy. But this is what we're looking for in terms of Fight Forever. We want to get into this game and play with all these characters. Of course, have customized characters. We're very curious to see what type of DLC they're going to give us. We've talked about, a Forbidden Door DLC, if it's ROH wrestlers, if they bring anyone from Impact, if, I know they have a partnership with, New Japan Pro Wrestling. I would like Tony Khan to have a partnership in the future with Noah as well. The sky's the limit when it comes down to AEW and their, just their diversity of different companies that they're willing to work with, and different people that they have no problem coming into their organization. They're able to wrestle for their titles, and then if someone wins from another company, they're able to represent and promote AEW, while they're in their own brand, and it brings more global awareness to what many fans wanted to see in terms of pro wrestling, and that we want to play with all these characters. The closest thing we got to some stuff like that was WCW versus the World Tour, and a little bit of Revenge. One thing I definitely want to see come back is the combat system they had in Revenge, where it was kind of like rock paper scissors, when you did like some of these striking combinations, and then you can go for a grapple or they can reverse it, or it'll diminish their special bar, that which basically will elevate them to get their finisher. And many of the things that um, I want to see too is also just the intensity that it brought to the table, just like when we played the N64 games. We want to run after our friends, or opponents, who has the ladder during a ladder match,
Yeah.
and everyone's trying to win, and now we have so much. I feel like this game could do so much more, and I want to. I'm really curious about this game. I mean, I'm gonna buy it. I'm gonna try it out and see what it's all about. And I know, it's hard to even admit this, but at least from what I see right now, they're doing it right compared to the way the TNA Impact game was released. The Impact game it looked amazing. The wrestling moves looked amazing, but then just the gameplay, getting out of a pin, applying submission. There's a lot of things that went wrong for that game. That it basically got to the point where easily TNA Impact did not want to produce another game like ever again, and it was tough for us because it literally post No Mercy, we literally had to play SmackDown Here Comes the Pain, which was the pinnacle for the earlier SmackDown titles, which took a lot of time over the years to improve their engines. And then me and Jason talked about years ago how it literally took post Here Comes the Pain for Raw versus SmackDown 2010 to be a very crisp game compared to a lot of the other Raw versus SmackDown games. And I feel like a lot of these games it's just been really repetitive and really lazy. Now some of these games have gotten better. Even during COVID. What was the last one? Was it 2019?
2K20.
2K20. So 2K20 was the game that we basically were like, okay, this is like the only thing we got going on until something new comes out. And it's crazy how it took 10 years for something to drastically happen, for us to be like, man, when are we going to get something different? And this was practically the answer that we've been waiting for since post No Mercy, because everywhere you go, when you talk to a wrestling fan, whether they're a casual fan or a hardcore fan, whether it's amongst people at work, people that kind of eavesdrop when you're online for something, your siblings, and friends at school, outside of school, all that stuff, everyone brings up No Mercy. Anyone that had an N64 and liked wrestling or couch co-op, besides party games like Mario Party also. That's one game we left out. Besides Mario Party and all these other great 4-player games at the time, everyone always talked about No Mercy. Like, because yes, of course, WCW Revenge 2000, World Tour, great games, amazing games. But no one talked about those games once No Mercy came out. And I want Fight Forever. I'm rooting for Fight Forever a lot. And I want to play as Kenny Omega. I want to play as Jericho. I want to play with everybody on the roster. And I can't wait to customize my own character and, see what they have to offer in terms of customization. And, hey, like, am I able to put on Bullet Club attire, or is that going to be post seasonal DOC. I'm willing to see what's going on. I know from what I heard, a lot of the stuff that's going to be in Fight Forever is really going to be kind of like the year one um, transition of AEW, and I understand that. I heard Brody Lee's going to be in the game, and they're going to have basically the older versions of the titles, the what they started with. So, the first TNT title, the first women's title, the first AEW title. So, there's not going to be no TBS title or All Atlantic title, just for example. So, you got anything else left to say, Jason?
Yeah, so I think a lot of things that you touch upon, I'll try to summarize a little bit too. So for me, I think one of the distinguishable differences between the pre, No Mercy era or the No Mercy era versus like the SmackDown versus Raws and that kind of series and the 2K series was that those games were very simulation based. They were trying their best with the technology to really create like the same pacing that you would get in a standard WWE wrestling match. The only problem is that when you look at standard WWE matches, they can be slow and painful to sit through and watch. So sometimes when you're playing these games, it's almost too authentic where it becomes slow and painful to play. I think the biggest thing that these N64 games had going for themselves, and something that I want to see in Fight Forever and what I've seen in some of the trailers, is the sense of urgency. One thing that was exciting when we were talking about earlier about racing to get the ladder or racing to get the pinfall is that at any given moment, your momentum could shift. Any given moment, someone else could be the one driving the ship as far as being able to actually win the match. So my feeling is that with this game, especially as far as expectations and things that I'll be looking for, is that sense of urgency. Because look, it is a wrestling game that will be able to do sim versus sim, which is great. At the same time, it's still a video game. Now, do I want to see it as like an arcade game to that overtly cartoonish level that they were originally going for? No. I think that wrestling fans have wanted a counterculture game to the standard WWE stuff for a long time, and we've already seen these kind of goofy, cartoonish, archaic type of games already in WWE, and they really haven't been entertaining. So I hope that what AEW does is blend that a bit. I hope what they do is give us the ring psychology and all the different moves that we got in WWE because, at this stage, they have been able to have a plethora and a library of moves. And some of the move sets I've seen already, it's the same engine style that Ukes was doing with them for years, because you got to remember a lot of those moves have been copied in the games over the years. So what I'm curious to see is taking those moves and how can you raise the stakes? How can we really have this sense of urgency with momentum, getting your finisher and finishing the match? So that's kind of some of the expectations I'll be having is, when I pick up this controller, will I be jazzed up to play with it? How long can you maintain the excitement for me? And will this truly be a game where you'll want to fight forever?
I get you. And I totally respect that. And the thing, and I want you to touch base on this too. I'm going to ask you a question. Do you feel, as I felt when you played the N64 games compared to the SmackDown games, one thing that's really important to me is tornado tag and regular tag team matches. And for whatever reason, when we had these N64 games, and I want to see this transition as well with Fight Forever, it was really important to make sure your team won, whether it's you and the AI or you and your friend, your buddy or brother, sisters. Very important was able to transition out with the right hot tag. And also, if you're in a tornado tag, you had like crisp movement of who you're facing rather than in the SmackDown games, you were holding a button and it was auto targeting,
Yep.
or you accidentally like grapple your partner
Mm-hmm.
and did a move and you're like, oh no, and then it totally messes up the momentum and shift of your plan of playing the game. And these N64 games, they did not happen unless you intentionally went and struck your opponent, your partner or whatever like that. But I mean, do you concur the way that that I'm thinking about these games too?
I would say yes. I mean, look, when it comes to like an example like tag team matches, one of the difference I felt between the 64 era games and what we have nowadays is that you can kind of just take care of yourself in the WWE games with the SmackDown games because you kind of just, you did your part. But I felt that in the melee style of Revenge and No Mercy in 2000, you kind of kept your eye on the ball across the board. You're looking for your partner, make sure they're okay. You're looking to see how many ways you guys can double team and do different stuff. There was more co-op aspect to the tag team matches than the tornado tag matches versus when you're playing a SmackDown game or a 2K game where you're just kind of like having two single matches separately. And then all you end up doing is just trying to break up the pin as opposed to the rotation system I felt when playing the N64 games where I could work this opponent for a few minutes and then go to the next. You could really get something going in that kind of way.
And you're right. You're right. That was another thing that was frustrating too. Was getting inside the ring, and then in SmackDown games, sometimes when you're trying to get inside the ring, they tell you it's L1 to get inside the ring, and for whatever reason, if you're trying to break up the pin, you're climbing the ropes, and by the time you climb the rope, and like you jump off, or you're trying to get off, the referee already pinned or counted three or they already called for the bell because of a submission. And that was one thing that really ticks off a lot of people. Leave a comment below if you definitely went through that. I mean, leave a comment for any experience you got. We definitely want you to leave a comment below on, what was your favorite game, what was your favorite experience, what was your least favorite experience. And that type of feedback is really important because at the end of the day, we want these developers and the company to have awareness of what the fans want. And very important things in the video game. You got characters, music, gameplay. Gameplay is extremely important. It's easily one of the things that could make and break the game. And another thing I would like to add is on how much work and how much how much I wonder how much the team is really dedicated into making this game, because we'll know once it comes out. We'll know if it was meant for a quick buck or they really want to put in the work for this, because we've seen things like this before, like where history doesn't repeat itself, it just rhymes. So we've seen that for years with the SmackDown games. We've seen this for years now with people in Hollywood making movies that no one asked for, because we know that sometimes certain movies that were supposed to be a one-off didn't need a sequel, or it didn't need a reboot. So a good example would be, let's see, what would be a good example? Easily, we were just talking about this movie couple of days ago in Santa Barbara. On the phone in Santa Barbara, right? And we were talking about Point Break. And we were talking about good old Johnny Utah, Keanu Reeves, and Patrick Swayze, and we talked about like how much of an impact that movie was for us growing up. And then they came out with this remake that no one asked for, and it just totally bombed. No one connected to this movie. Everybody knew it was a remake, so this movie came out in the wrong place at the wrong time because it was something that no one wanted. And a lot of people were fans of Patrick Swayze, especially since he passed from cancer. And also, Everyone loves Keanu. I mean, who doesn't love Keanu? So, it was just one of those things where like it didn't need to be touched. Like it was okay. It's like the same thing with like Dumb and Dumber. And then they came out with the sequel. So we don't want something that's a nostalgia cash grab, just because a lot of us been through that already, and we need something fresh. We need something that's gonna define uh, a generation in terms of our gaming. And right now we're in the perfect time for the PS5 life cycle. The almost an end of an era for the PS4 life cycle. We're still pumping games, or we're still producing. And I don't know if this is going to be released for the Switch. Do you know if it's going to be released for
I
the
think it's going
Switch?
to be released for the Switch, and at the minimum, definitely the PS4 as well. They're going to have it in the previous gen releases, which makes me very curious because I could tell you this much now: when we had previous gen releases for, I believe it was PS3 and PS4 for the TNA Impact game, the PS3 model was, I mean, as bad as the PS4 version was, PS3 one was absolutely horrible. And I could be incorrect about the PlayStation numbers, but they did have two generations that they had for Impact game, and it was awful. I think actually maybe it was PS2, PS3, and I felt bad for the PS2 fans that had it because it just ran poorly. And one thing that I hope AEW keeps in mind is to not make a trashy backlock version of the game for PS4 because that's going to be a first impression uh, thing that you're going to have on fans that don't have a PS5 yet, or they have a PS5 but they don't want to spend the extra money and they want to get the PS4 version. So if you put out any version of this game that doesn't run smoothly outside of the standard bugs, it's going to be a problem. And we talked earlier about all these games that come out every year. I mean, it's an unfortunate factor that, you know, with sports games in particular, you always release something new every year. But sometimes there isn't room for innovation. So I think what's good is the heads up that we're getting now, which is this is not going to be a yearly game release. So that means it is imperative that the engine system they have going is strong gameplay because I don't know if they're going to be able to have, unless it's with patch notes, able to upgrade the gameplay. So the gameplay has got to be strong. The foundation of the game has got to be strong because if the long term plan is to have at least 2 years of DLC, of new content, of new game, of new characters, I don't know if they'll do new matches. But the engine that I lightly heard from Omega talking about was that they wanted to make sure that they had something so strong that it could last for several years. And to add on to that, that's what these games had going for themselves back in the day. A WrestleMania 2000, a No Mercy. You didn't need to release games every single year because when you did, sometimes you would see adjustments. Most notably, WWF Warzone to Attitude made some adjustments here and there, but by and large, you see a repetitive nature. But when you create strong games, you can just keep it going. So I'm hoping with the PS5 technology, I'm hoping with the dedication that these wrestlers have as gamers, that we can have a strong engine with strong, consistent, exciting gameplay so that when you add on new characters, add on new, hopefully, matches, we can have something exciting. Because if the root isn't strong, nothing new you add will be able to hold itself up.
Yeah, and I definitely concur with that. I mean, if you don't have the foundation, you have nothing. Nothing follows, nothing grows. And if you're looking at the screenshot right now of my GameTalk template, the foundation is right there. Look at it. Years of great gaming right there surrounding the cover Fight Forever. And this is why, you know, for me, they can't afford to fail. They can't afford to fail this game because if they fail this game, it's going to be a laughing stock. And we don't want that. We want this to succeed. And also to touch base on the gameplay too, I'm pretty sure with a lot of the stuff that's transitioning with gaming and systems nowadays, with everything that's next gen, usually now if it's PS5, PS4, Xbox, Switch, usually everything kind of runs on the same the wavelength in terms of like the quality of gaming, right? And that's why stuff like the Switch has was made because I mean let's face it, right? If you had your primary Nintendo system, right, and you had your generic ported game, whatever was a AAA title, or underrated title, it played perfectly on your regular Nintendo system. And then, you have or your Game Boy Advances, your 3DS or whatever. And mind you, it's a very criminal thing. It's really repetitive, but Nintendo tried to do their best in the past systems when they release games. If you look at any game that's like a Mario Kart, a fighting game like Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, you know, Star Wars games, different types of Star Wars games. And Nina, I might remind you guys, even like stuff like Ninja Turtle games, darn well that the games on the consoles were totally different games on your handheld devices, going all the way back from, the original Game Boy to like the 3DS. So, of course, it was, not the greatest thing, and it sucked that people had to resort to certain handheld games, because they just really look like a bootleg copy of the main console game. Even wrestling games, we've seen really bad wrestling games on handheld ports as well.
Yeah.
So
So many Game Boys, so many Game Boy Advance.
so many Game Boy Advance, so many Game Boys. But I think with this transition, if they do this correctly, the way it's supposed to be, you're practically playing a successor to No Mercy in your hands on the go
Yeah.
with the Nintendo Switch.
And I think like the other thing too with that is that it could be a successor and a love letter to it. I think also what they're going to need to do is also add something that makes it AEW. I know they're going to have certain match types like the exploding barbed wire match and stuff like that, and replicating what came before it is great. But you're also going to need to put your own signature on it that really makes it stand out. At the same time, sometimes if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We talked about Ninja Turtles earlier. Ninja Turtles just released so many compilations of their old retro games, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but the sales were phenomenal. The sales were phenomenal, and it didn't require, heavy high-end technology. It didn't require 3D gaming. It didn't require all the same type of budget that you would put into stuff. And it wasn't just the retro stuff, too. They had a sequel to stuff in those Turtle games they released. So all the fans want is something that is genuinely different, because we live in a world now where community creations is at an all-time high. If you play WWE, you could get your own roster. You can get an AEW roster, damn near flawless. You can get a New Japan roster, NWA roster. You can mix and match. I mean, the creating ability in the 2K games now are very good. You can find some duds on community creations, but I mean, you could find anything and everything. So for me, what they're definitely going to need to keep doing as far as being counterculture is that when you pick up this game, it has to feel like I'm playing an AEW game. I'm playing the AEW module of wrestling gameplay. Because this is what they really need to do to stand out from the pack. When you pick up a WWE 2K game, you want to feel the motion and feel like this is how a 2K pacing game works. But when I pick up AEW, I got to shift gears. I got to shift my mind. I got to shift my strategy because I need to bring it in an AEW video game versus just picking it up and feeling like, oh, I really can't tell the difference between this and WWE except it's a lower graded level. I can forgive the graphics. I can forgive the lack of match types. I can forgive a lot of things that these other WWE games have had the ability through osmosis, through over time, over 20 years, to add in a Hell in a Cell, add in an improved Hell in a Cell, add in new things for ladder matches. We as wrestling fans forget sometimes that it wasn't just presto changeo. We had new match types. They had to put in the most bare bones version of it and then build it up slowly. So I can forgive that we don't have steel cage matches or versions of Hell in a Cell in this new AEW game. What will not be forgiven is the gameplay. It has got to be high-end excitement, and it's got to feel like AEW.
Yes, and my ad, speak like he's talked about the Ninja Turtle games, Shredder's Ninja Turtles, Shredder's Revenge. The physical copy is finally coming out. I think around the 27th or the 29th of this month. You can get it now on digital in the Nintendo store. But this is what we're talking about. We love games. We love video games. We love, wrestling games. We love beat 'em ups like Ninja Turtles, Streets of Rage, Double Dragons. We love shoot 'em ups. We love RPGs. We love JRPGs. We love Triple G, even though he lost to Canelo. We still love you. But hey, this is what we're talking about. Right now, we're talking about AEW Fight Forever. And, for us, for this, how many years? Like 20 years already?
20 years plus.
20 years plus. 20 years plus. Tell them again.
20 years plus.
20 years plus. So if we're waiting 20 years plus for a game that's similar, like walks like No Mercy, talks like No Mercy, pretty much is like No Mercy, but it has their own, spin to it. And it looks really intense. Especially it looks exactly the way they wrestle on TV. For me, like AEW is like a live action version of the Fire Pro Wrestling games. If you guys don't know what the Fire Pro Wrestling games, Google it. I still tell Jason to this day, the PS2 version, the Japanese version, because when it was released in Japan, of the Wrestling Kingdom, I think it's 2. Wrestling game. It's kind of similar to a SmackDown like engine, like Here Comes the Pain engine. That's one of my favorite all-time games, and we appreciate the Mexican culture and the Japanese culture, the European culture of the wrestlers there, and what they bring to the table. And I believe all of this is relevant to AEW. Like this is their Silk Road right now. If everything Tony Khan is doing goes right, and I want everything. We want the best for them and the best for this game. So before we sign off, Jason, where could they find you online, or just your information for Jamoba?
So if you guys want to check out Jamoba Gear and try something brand new with interactive clothes that you can play games off of the jackets and the t-shirts, visit gmobagear.com. That's GMOBA gear.com.
And thank you so much for being our special guest. Thank you for spending your time. I know it's the time difference between here and Shanghai is crazy, but I appreciate this. This has been a well overdue podcast for us. And yeah, guys, like, comment, subscribe. We're almost at 100 subscribers, and that's the first goal. I appreciate you guys, and keep on gaming. Peace.